Good evening, YouTubers. I've got to keep my voice down. My darling wife is asleep in the other room and I don't want to be shouting and waking her up. I'm going to talk about the moon landings because many of you will be far too young to remember. But I was only a young lad myself in 1969 when Apollo 11 landed on the moon. Well, part of it anyway, the lunar module. And we were all like, wow, wow, lapping it all up like kittens, watching it all on the news. And they even had live coverage of it landing, you know, filmed from the spacecraft. And they even filmed it taking off again and whizzing off into the stars. And, yeah, you know, I bought the Airfix model of the Saturn V rocket. I really believed it, honestly, I believed it all at the time, but that was until I got a bit older and I started to have doubts. I mean, I genuinely, I'm not a moon landing conspiracy theory person, okay? I genuinely believe that they told us that they landed on the moon. Whether they actually did or not, I really doubt. I really doubt, because don't forget, my reasons, you see, for doubting it in later life. I did a firefighting course, you know, with breathing apparatus, and you have this air bottle on your back. Okay, and you go into a room and doing a left-hand search, but you can't see. You're doing left-hand search, following the walls, and so you do a right hand coming back out. So you can feel your way into rooms, into smoke-filled rooms with breathing apparatus on. And you've got a gauge that you're constantly looking at, lifting the gauge up and seeing how much air you've got left. And one of these bottles, and these are lightweight Kevlar bottles, they're still heavy. And they lasted less than 20 minutes. Okay, now the diving bottles that people used in those days were made of steel, and they were seriously heavy. You know, you get one of them on your back and you don't want to walk very far with that on your back. And these people went off to the moon. How much air would they need? They were there for 2 weeks or something like that. I can't remember. But so air was an issue, but I'm not convinced with, especially a little lunar module. And this is a vertical takeoff and landing craft. Now, I've flown helicopters, okay, and I've done vertical takeoffs in VR on the flight simulators and Harrier, for example, F-35. They're a tricky old thing to master, and these are not rocket engines. These are jet engines, which are a lot easier to control than a rocket motor. And of course, when you get down there in your lunar module, you might put one of the legs down a hole, and then it's on the piss, isn't it? No, I'm sorry. I'm just not buying the moon landings, and I do believe they got a rocket high enough to actually orbit the moon, because I think that is feasible. The Apollo 8, I think it was, that flew round the moon. Because you can't see the other side of the moon. They call it the dark side of the moon. It's no darker than the other side, but it's like you're a fish and you're looking up at a ship. You're only ever going to see the bottom of the ship. No matter where it is sailing round and round the world, you're only going to see the bottom of the ship. You're not going to see the deck if you're a fish. And that's what the moon's like. The moon's going round, and they had these dreams that there was cities and aliens and all kinds on the other side. So the whole thing with the space race between the Americans and the Russians was to get a spaceship in a high enough orbit to photograph the other side of the planet, because if there was any aliens there, you want to make friends with them before the Russians do, and vice versa. And so once they'd spent all this money and they'd flown round the dark side of the moon, which I genuinely believe they did. Okay, I might be mistaken at that as well, but let's go with it. Flew around the other side, the dark side of the moon, and there's nothing there either. And they went, that's disappointing, crushing blow. The Russians didn't even bother trying to fabricate moon landings and things like that. But the Americans, they went through it big time. And who was the President of the United States at the time of the first moon landing? It was Richard Nixon, otherwise known as Tricky Dicky. He got himself in a lot of mess for not being that truthful. Maybe it was an alternative truth. Alternative facts. Well, whatever your opinion is on the moon landings, I deeply, deeply suspect that we may have all been blagged. Your comments below, please. Thank you.